wrong names. I apologize. Let me just check.
Just while they're doing that, if I can mention, yes, some other points that were made. The small groups that don't have power at all. At one stage, we considered inviting civil society to be part of the constitution-making process early on. And we decided there are just too many faith groups, too many trade unions, too many women's organizations. It would become a huge popular assembly. And we wouldn't get our constitution that way. And people would be knocking on the door to get in, to be heard, and so on. So they had to be represented in other ways. The size, we had 400 members of parliament in the final constitution-making body, but that was chosen, and we had proportional representation. And proportional representation without a minimum cut-off point. You only needed 50,000 votes to get one person in. And so we had some very small groups that were there, but they felt they were there. And I don't think anywhere on a purely, we might have had one African Muslim party, I think it was called, African Christian Democratic Party, but they had between them something like 5 people out of 400. All the others, although many would claim Christian and make a big point of that, didn't stand for office on the basis of identifying themselves as belonging to a particular group. In terms of how I see things in South Africa, I think our main mission has been accomplished. Our main mission was to destroy the system of apartheid and create the foundations of a democratic society. And we've got that. Our people speak their minds. They're very, very open. I don't think we're going to surrender our freedom of speech. It might be pushed a bit back here, pushed a bit back there. Secondly, we have a very powerful constitution and strong institutions to defend it, include the Constitutional Court, a free press, independent judiciary. We have free and fair elections. To have proper control of elections is absolutely vital, and independent electoral authorities. And our elections are so good, people come to observe them, not to see if they're free and fair, but what lessons can they learn from South Africa to take to other countries. And that's all well entrenched. The freedom of speech has positive and negative sides, because some people use it and they say terrible things that wound me and upset me and challenge the whole non-racial basis of what we've achieved. But you can't say we have freedom of speech as long as you say things that I like. And that's part of the pain that you pay, part of the price that you pay, provided they don't offend certain constitutional norms that limit protections on hate speech. We've got a strong economy, it's very robust, a strong constitution, and when we have political problems, you don't go to each other's throats. We haven't had an army coup, we haven't had our president step down. In fact, the average incumbency of a president in South Africa is 4 years. Mandela stepped down after 5 years. He could have had 2 terms, maximum of 2 terms. We changed the president because the ANC voted out Thabo Mbeki as the president of the ANC, not because of the coup, but because of the internal democratic process of the ANC. So I think democracy is strong in our country, it's well rooted, but part of the price of democracy is a lot of people say and do things that you don't like.
There were 2 questions to the panel. The first question was how to change society culture in the country to make informative decisions. I wish I had the answer to that, like the justice here have. However, I'm going to say that what we are going through in Jordan, something that I have observed is that the fact there is a need for the people to make informative decisions, taking into consideration the international conventions that the country has ratified and so on. There is a need to unify the opposition. And when I say unifying the opposition, I'm not talking about where the opposition becomes one party, but you need the opposition to agree on certain principles, sort of abiding principles where all the opposition in the country agree upon in order to face the leadership and force the leadership to start negotiating with the opposition on the process towards democratization. And this actually leads into what the Justice had said. There is a need for that national dialogue, but the opposition has to go in with those principles unified. And in that national dialogue, you start with what you agree upon. And you move from what you agreed upon towards issues where there is a conflict. And by starting with the issues that you agree upon, it's like any mediation that a lawyer goes into. You start with what we have in common, and what we have in common glues things together towards what we have a dispute. This is what I think should be done. The other question regarding how big constitution and making body should be, I don't know. What we have in Jordan is that we have a royal committee appointed by the monarch to look into partial constitutional amendments. It does not have women representation. It has people who have been in the executive branch or in the judiciary for the longest time, so it's not really representative of the society. However, we did have an experience in Jordan where there was a national dialogue in 1988 with the National Accord, and that was the moment in time when the late King Hussein thought that there's a need for Jordan to start the democratization process. And in that experience, we had all the political parties, civil society, women's groups, the professional associations, members of the Palestinian community, members of the East Jordanian community, all of them worked in a big committee with working groups towards drafting the national accord upon which the country resumed the parliamentary elections. And I think this is the process of what we need in a country like Jordan. We have first of all to acknowledge what are the interests of the different communities that form the Jordanian society, and from that to move on towards civil liberties and so on. And I really look at it as, when you look at the trauma victim, how do you start dealing with that trauma victim? You need to acknowledge and understand that trauma victims' needs, and provide the basic needs, and move on to rehabilitation. And this is, I think, what should be done in a political process where you have different groups with different interests. You need to acknowledge those interests and then come with a common ground. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say how honored we are, Justice Sachs, that you're with us. And I want to answer a few things that you have taken up. Unlike South Africa, Egypt's revolution is an unfinished business. So today what we want, really, is how the most important thing, I think, the element in this process of transition is constitutionalism. But how do we constitutionalize the protection of citizen rights? I have an argument that says that Egypt is in a phase of competitive politics today. And I believe it is immensely important to delineate the shared values and rights that cut across ideological, religious, and class lines before being caught up in political competition, which really divides people. So what is it? What essentially do we share as Egyptians? I think that this is much more important before we embark on what would be a very bruising process. So my suggestion is, and I would like your opinion on that, is to have something similar to the Bill of Rights, which would be, for instance, a declaration of shared Egyptian values. This is starting with it. Now, how the rights of citizens are guaranteed in practice through a governance system anchored in the rule of law and the consent of the government is the promise that looms ahead. We still don't know what the steps towards it is. So, As I said before, we are in phase 2 of the struggle to transform the revolutionary promise into a functioning, constitutional, democratic and civic state that actually protects citizens' rights in the political, economic, social and cultural fields. So this is the great drama that's now being played on. I want to answer our friends here from Somalia and to say that according to the amendments, the new parliamentary and presidential, the new parliament and the president are obliged to elect a commission of 100 members to draft a new constitution within 6 months. However, the modalities remain unclear, as you have so incisively underlined, whether or not the members of the commission will be taken from the parliament itself or from a larger spectrum of political and social forces and experts outside the parliament. So this is the crucial issue that we are debating here now in Egypt. If we want to reach a shared and inclusive political transition, I believe that the pace and the extent of political change in Egypt will very much depend on the capacity of political and civil society to take active part, not only in the transition process, but in the bargaining process, as you have suggested, Justice, and to bargain with the military council and with future public authorities. Because we have a double problem, it's not only political. We have to cope with the negative effects of the current economic crisis resulting from the revolution. And we have to deal with the structural socio-economic problems which were left unaddressed under the previous regime. Now, as for the Constitution of 1954, you are quite right. That's why I'm wondering why they are taking so much time. We had a perfect constitution in 1954, was accepted, was debated. We had the top constitutionalists drafting it, so we won. Of course, there should be some amendments to cope with the changing era, but the basis is there. It's the same basis as 1923. So there is really no excuse today to say that the Constitution will take 3 months, that will take, I don't know. We need the Constitution before because we need a roadmap. We cannot base this commission that will elect the members from inside if we don't know what kind of a parliament we have. The strongest parties that we have, strongest forces we have today are the Muslim Brotherhood and the remnants of the UNDP. If we have an election tomorrow, they're the ones who will have the majority in parliament. We would not have changed anything from the past regime. There is no time for new forces to organize themselves, to mobilize supporters. There is no time for older parties who have been inert until now to revive, and rejuvenate themselves. So this is the big thing. The other thing about confidential negotiation, I would say one of the very sensitive points that have to be taken into consideration in confidential negotiations is the role of the army in a new constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity, having clarified the names, to introduce Kamal Hilmi, who's from the Moroccan University. He's our 4th panelist. Welcome. His contributions will be supported by translation. So we do have somebody who will be translating. So please feel free to field questions to him on the Moroccan experience as well. Interestingly, this whole issue of who drives the constitution is very much alive in sub-Saharan Africa, a region where I work. We have constitution-making processes currently underway in Zimbabwe, we have a constitution-making process that's just been completed in Kenya. And just to share a few experiences in Zimbabwe, there was a big debate on who will develop the constitution. The political parties, for those of you who may remember, had gone into an agreement, a political settlement, and they had before that drafted a constitution which they both pretty much agreed on. This is the two political parties, ZANU-PF and MDC. Now, their thinking was, which addresses the point by my colleague Sudarshan, that it's dangerous to let those who are already in power or who have a stake to run the process. They pretty much were happy with the constitution, which was called the Kariba draft. But there was a movement, a social movement, that said, no, we want a people-driven constitution. It was not so clear what that meant, whether it meant that the people themselves should write the constitution, but how do you even begin to do that? Which people, where, how? So they had to find a compromise. And this was, the compromise was that a parliamentary committee would lead the constitution-making process. But there were important principles that were embedded in the constitution-making process to ensure that the process was consultative. So there are different experiences. In Kenya, they didn't go the Zimbabwe route. They started before us. I'm a Zimbabwean, as I pointed out. But in Kenya, they felt, Kenya had been writing its constitution for 25 years. This is something that people may not know. The current constitution that was adopted in Kenya, the process has been going on for years. The last process ended up in a referendum against the constitution. And there was a feeling amongst many Kenyans that the referendum wasn't really about the substance, but it was about the political players and the stake they had in the outcome of the constitution. So this time around, Kenyans felt that, well, look, we would need to open up. We did that before. Let's get a committee of experts that are widely accepted, largely very independent, combining some Kenyans, but mostly outsiders. So they brought in this committee of experts to come and rewrite the constitution, but with built-in mechanism to consult as widely as possible. And then, of course, the valve, which was the referendum. People must vote on it. Ultimately, the constitution has to be voted on. People must say whether they like it or not. There was a big concern in Kenya that after all this process, people may vote no or yes, and then they're back to square one. So they were actually now thinking of trying to have putting to the voters constitutions that would ultimately result in a yes. There was that thinking as well, that you give different options. Option A, option B, option C. So that ultimately, you still do have a constitution. But I think at the end of the day, they felt that that whole process was going to be very complicated. So it was again a yes and a no. I will stop there, and I would like to open up opportunity again for other inputs. If you can just raise your hand so I can get a sense of. Yes, thank you.
Decentralization Support Unit, Ministry of Local Development. My question addressed to the Constitution in South Africa. We have two issues. The first one is the local development, and the other is the local government. So, to what extent these two issues were defined and elaborated in the Constitution in South Africa? And what to be mentioned concerning the local development and the local government? What to be mentioned in the Constitution, and what to be mentioned should be mentioned in the laws. So this is my question. Thank you. Yeah, my question is about in the Constitution of South Africa. So I'm talking about the issue of local development. Was it defined in the Constitution or not? And the local government also. To what extent the local development and the stress of this issue for the societies, and to what extent the stress on the local government, its rules, its functions, its division, was mentioned in the Constitution, And what should be mentioned in the Constitution and what should be mentioned in the laws? Thank you.
Yes, could we take another question, please, over there? And if you can just indicate by just raising your hand if you would like to pose a question or a comment.
My name is Mohamed. I'm a freelancer consultant as an NGO by myself for marketing, human resources, and management for all the liberal parties in Egypt. Well, my question is, I want to know, like, if we are going to do the constitution here in Egypt, 100% to establish this constitution, is it feasible according to your experience? Is it feasible? And second, should it be done before? It's a simple question, but like, we want simple answers as well. The 100 people to establish a constitution, is it feasible according to your experience? And should it be done before the parliament or afterwards? And third question, as a practitioner, okay, so the constitution 100, and then before or after, what's your experience so that we can follow? And the third thing, if the government starts from now in all ministries applying something like the SAP. SAP is an IT system. SAP, S-A-P, it's an IT system. As a practitioner, let's start doing something now. In all the ministries, all the government, we start by applying 5% of the SAP, 10% of the SAP. The SAP system is applied in AUC, in Halliburton as an oil company, in Shell as an oil company. It's a system, what we need. Yesterday I heard in the presentation, administration of the expectation. I'm not talking about big words, PhDs, I'm speaking practitioner. How to administer what we have right now. Slowly everything, I think in 1 year, could be transparent in any country in the world. Is this feasible? It happens somewhere? In 1 year, applying SAP. SAP makes everything so transparent. All invoices coming into any ministry, any project, all salary groups, all job description, everything is so transparent. Like 90%, the system is stronger than people. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions before I... Yes, please. Go ahead, sir. Yes, please. Go ahead. Okay.
Are you listening? Are you listening?
Yes, please go ahead. He's here. Yes, go ahead.
Right. I want to know whether it's possible or whether you actually have dealt with some of the very agonizing questions in South Africa, pre-apartheid or apartheid South Africa, tribal, race, and class. Whether the Constitution has tried to address some of these in its clauses, in its rulings, in its provisions. All of these questions or problems would be or were left to the evolution of the society itself. Class, race, and ethnicity in South Africa. Has the Constitution, as you were drafted, tried to address these issues? And if it has, what is the outcome 20 years later?
Thank you very much. There is a question, a request for clarification, Madam.
Okay, SAP is an IT system. I'm not an IT person, but what I'm trying to say, like in the oil sector in the world, like Shell, Halliburton, even AUC, they are applying a system called SAP. I don't know the abbreviation is what again, but I was working in Shell, so I know how efficient it is and how the system, IT system, like information technology, IT information technology system, you put all the data of the company. In any ministry, any company, any project, you just put everything, all the invoices in, any application form you write, all the salary groups, all job descriptions, all appraisals, Things are so transparent that the system is stronger than people. If people are not afraid of God, they are afraid of each other. No matter what the caliber of people are. That's why Europe is working. Most Europe, I can tell you, Amoco is one of the oil companies in Saudi Arabia, is working by the Sachs. When you see their offices, it's something hilarious how advanced they are. The system, all what we need at the end of the day is a system, but people underestimate the system. And even we say it here in Egypt. So it's a system, a simple information technology system where everything in the company or in a ministry is through the system. You put in the information and things are 90%. Of course, transparency couldn't be 100%. Even confidentiality. But we don't want it the other way around. 90% transparent and 10% confidential, not the other way around. But there are secrecy somewhere, somehow in any ministry or organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have questions directed specifically to Justice Sachs and then more general questions. I think maybe we can start off with the questions directed to you, Justice. And this was the question of how do you, my understanding, if I want to just drill down the question is, the whole question of non-discrimination in the Constitution. Can you use the Constitution to entrench non-discriminatory principles and values, tribalism, racism, whatever it might be? I think that was the question. There were other questions, of course, on local government. How do you address the issue of local development, not decentralization, but the issues of local decentralization and local development in the Constitution? Did you have any experience with these issues? Did you look at them? And then there were other general questions, just to remind the panel. Will it be possible to have a constitution in Egypt? This was a very pointed question. Is it we talking and talking and talking? Can we have one? I guess that's an answer the Egyptians will have to answer as well, but let's hear what the panel has to say. Then there was the issue of how do you entrench accountability and transparency into the constitution-making process. Those are the four sort of broad questions. Over to you, Justice.
The Constitution functions in different ways. But not if it's only on. And I think sometimes why what we call the masses are sometimes a little bit distant from the Constitution. I think the Constitution is a document for the political elite, the lawyers, the members of Parliament, and it's full of phrases, the rule of law, and parliamentary, and presidential, and I say, that's got nothing to do with me, in my life, in my village, in my area. And I think part of the art of involving people in the Constitution is for them to appreciate it actually has everything to do with you. If you are beaten up by your husband and the police don't do anything about it because they feel, well, that's the position of women, that's a constitutional matter. If you are locked in by your employer because the employer says, no, you go out and you come back drunk, and you can't get out and there's a fire and you're going to death, that's a constitutional matter. These are issues that are human dignity. And if people feel that the Constitution speaks for them,